Eva, and Men Are Like Waffles.
Thank you, Jim, and fellow Toastmasters. Well, on Tuesday of this week, my husband and I celebrated our second year anniversary. And in the last 732 days, I have learned a lot about myself, about my husband, and about the unique dynamic of communication within marriage. And so today, I want to share with you a few of the things that I've learned so that hopefully maybe you can learn from some of my mistakes. Now, I feel like I need to give you a little background on my husband and I, since you don't know us necessarily that well. My husband is an introvert. I am an extrovert. My husband is laid back, easygoing, calm. I could be considered high-strung, hyper, and nonstop talking. Definitely the biggest area in our relationship that has been interesting to learn about in our marriage is definitely that of communication. Now, I want to give you an example of what happened during our first 3 months of marriage. I would get home from work, and I mean, after all, I hadn't seen my husband for at least 9 hours, and despite being like a crazy person, texting him all day long, telling him things all day long, I felt like I had to talk to him all day. So I'd get home and literally follow him around the house. He would go into the bathroom and I'd go and I'd go, you won't believe what I read today on Facebook. So Julie, I don't know if you remember Julie, she was one of my sorority sisters. We're not really friends anymore. But anyway, I saw on Facebook today that Julie got engaged to Steve. Now this is interesting because Julie used to be with Kevin. But anyway, Kevin was a guy in college that had the glass eye. Well anyway, Steve is her new fiance. She was engaged before, if you remember. Anyway, Steve flies for Southwest Airlines. You know, I've been thinking, I really wonder if Southwest Airlines is ever going to go to Hawaii. Following the kitchen. I really want to go to Hawaii for a long time. You know, one thing I like about flying is you can get ginger ale on the flights. I never think to buy ginger ale when I'm at the grocery store, but on planes, ginger ale always seems like a great thing to do. And you know, one time when I was on a plane, I sat next to this guy who was a science teacher. And he said that dissecting squid is this really interesting thing. I don't know about that, but I do like seafood, and I mean, that's science related, right? By the way, the Grants invited us to dinner on June 17th, and we're going to have dinner with them, and I told him that you don't like seafood, so don't worry about that. So anyway, back to Julie. I think that Julie and Steve will probably invite us to their wedding. I don't know if we're going to want to go, though, because it's in Florida. So anyway, how's your day? My husband, his brain would be exploding. And then for some reason, June 17th would roll around, and I'd be like, is that where you're going to live? And he'd go, is this where I'm going to live what? Dinner at the Grants. I told you about this 3 weeks ago when I got home from work. Don't you remember? And I would find myself getting frustrated, this built-up annoyance. Like, why doesn't he listen to me? Why doesn't he hear anything I say? I told him 3 weeks ago that we were having dinner at the Grants, and I specifically told him that he doesn't like seafood. Why doesn't he remember? I don't get it. But 3 months into marriage, a friend of mine, I was giving this frustration, actually my friend Liz Grant, who we were having dinner at, that he hadn't remembered, and she recommended a great book to me called Men Are Like Waffles, Women Are Like Spaghetti by Bill and Pam Farrell. And this book has really revolutionized the way I communicate with my husband. In the book, the authors basically make the argument that men's brains are kind of structured overall like a waffle. Now, I do want to give a side note here that if you don't agree with this in your situation with your husband or wife, this is to some degree a stereotype which just happens to perfectly fit my marriage. So don't take it personally if you don't think this matches with your life. But anyway, the authors argue that men are like waffles. Basically, men's brains are kind of like a grid. They think of one thing at one time. If a guy's in the garage tinkering around, he's thinking about tinkering around in the garage. If a man is reading a book, he's thinking about the book that he's reading. If a man is eating dinner, he's thinking about eating dinner. Women, meanwhile, they argue, are like a plate of cooked spaghetti. If you try to pull out one strand, one topic, it's going to touch everything else on the plate. It's everything else. This was revolutionary to me. Because I am a plate of spaghetti. Everything affects everything else. I never am just thinking of one thing at one time. And to be honest, the concept of only thinking at one thing at one time, I can't even comprehend the idea of only thinking of one thing at one time. But since I read this book, I started to try to think it through a little bit. And I started to apply some of these principles to my marriage. Now, one of the lessons I've learned about this thinking of one thing at one time is that my husband sometimes can literally be thinking about nothing. Nothing. There's a nothing box in which he thinks about nothing. And it's not that he's not intelligent, he's a very intelligent man, but he can literally be thinking about nothing. So I've tried to remind myself that that's okay. And in fact, that's a great thing, because my husband has an amazing ability to actually, when he is in a box, concentrate on things and follow through and logically process information and do things efficiently and quickly. Whereas I'm all over the place. I'm going to pay a check, and then, oh, I see, this bag of trash needs to be taken over here, and oh, I'm going over here, and oh, I didn't feed the bunny. And I'm all over the place. So that's one of the great things about my husband, is that he can think of one thing at one time. So here's how it has changed the way I communicate with my husband. First of all, I try to make sure that he's in the same box I am at the same time. Now, sometimes this doesn't work, but usually I've noticed that I say, Jacob, I want to talk to you about June 17th. We've been invited to dinner at the Grants. What do you think about going? If I consciously get him to be in the same box that I am, it seems to help him focus on the same thing. And then when the 17th rolls around, he'll probably remember about the dinner that we have at the Grants. Another thing I've learned is to just be direct. I used to think this was kind of rude, to say what you want and say it specifically and concisely, and I've been learning maybe it's not. This is a great example. Our anniversary was on Tuesday. I wanted a high thread count Egyptian sheets for our bed. We have kind of crummy sheets, and I'm like, it'd be really nice to get some nice sheets. So instead of doing what I would have done a year ago, this is what I would have done a year ago. I would have, in January, 3 months before our anniversary, said, I'm really tired of these sheets. I kind of like some Egyptian high thread count ones. Assuming that he would remember that, of course, this was important because I brought it up in January, and of course he'd remember, because of course it wasn't in a litany of things. But instead, 2 weeks ago, I said, Jacob, you know what I'd really like for our anniversary this year? I would like some red Egyptian sheets, high thread count. He said, what's a high thread count? And I said, well, at least, a 500 or higher. And he said, okay. I got a set of sheets. So slowly over time, I am learning that my husband thinks of one thing at one time, and that is a beautiful, wonderful thing. And unfortunately for him, he just has to deal with the spaghetti brain. Thank you.